If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK. You are listening to the Columbine Conspiracy Series. This is episode 17, The Satanic Connection. We are going to delve into an aspect of this case that few dare. And this aspect is, of course, an occult satanic aspect. Some believe there's a specific link with the game Vampire Masquerade, but it's more far-reaching than that. And to examine the landscape of the 90s with vampire and goth culture on the rise, I mean, it is actually quite curious when people think was the most popular era for goths. Some allege it was the late 90s, some allege it was the early 2000s. But post-2010 or so, I mean, goths really aren't quite as all over the place. Although there are token characters here and there in media, it seems like the late 90s, early 2000s was kind of the peak of goth culture, at least in the modern era. So, obviously, we're not going to get into the etymology of gothic and gothic novels and going back to all of that centuries prior. We are only examining this within the scope of the Columbine case. As always, if you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help logic and reason return to a world where it is quickly going extinct, particularly in examining true crime and conspiracies of all kinds. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Get access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons, you get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Alright, obviously the previous episodes are relatively required, but if you I mean, a lot of people that listen to the Columbine series podcast here, they only have a cursory overview of the official narrative on the Idiot Box. They haven't looked through the documentation. They might have looked at a couple of debunk videos or podcasts, just these rushed, fallacious appeals to faith, instead of looking at the actual documentation, which is why I always cite sources and document numbers, so even the most gullible of goof coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists can see that in law enforcement's own documentation, this evidence exists. So, in typical MINDSHOCK fashion, let's move to the vampire hypothesis. So the one and only Star Viego, a lot of goofs think I'm actually Star Viego. I mean, there's a lot of clueless goofs out there. But Star Viego, who's made a lot of posts on the anomalies and the coincidence stack regarding Columbine, also put forth this hypothesis. Again, I don't know if he or she were the one to coin this. But again, this is archived on Tapatalk, August 5th, 2004, so it may actually have been a much earlier post, but this is the archive as it exists. The vampire hypothesis postulates that the attackers at Columbine High School were acting out or under the influence of a game scenario from White Wolf Incorporated's live-action role-playing game, LARP, Vampire the Masquerade. A few eyewitnesses say the trenchcoats were definitely into the vampire. The trenchcoaters, or trenchcoat mafia, whatever you want to call them, were definitely into the vampire game. Now, before we go deeper, since this is MINDSHOCK, let's keep logic and reason at the forefront. Let's not fall for any silly false dichotomy logical fallacies. If there is some kind of CIA, MK Ultra influence, again, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, check them out. I mean, there's quite a mountain of evidence. Now, whether it's true or not is a separate matter, but there's clearly a lot of evidence to suggest the possibility that something like it at least was going on. Something more than meets the eye, at least. Now, is it possible that there were multiple operations overlapping, or that part of the MKUltra operation involved White Wolf's game. Almost like a side project or a side experiment to assess efficacy, and it was not the bulk or the main mechanism of which anything was accomplished. Because again, going back through Eric Harris's history at Air Force bases in New York State, and shady individuals that may have been involved at Columbine High School, including faculty with CIA or military connections, and then of course the psychotropic drugs and medications that allegedly both Harris and Klebold may have been taking. So a lot of different variables to keep in mind at once. Let's not hallucinate or pretend to know which exact variable is or isn't related without knowing. Because unless there's some top-ranking CIA listeners, and even then, they might still not have the clearances. I mean, you'd have to have every clearance ever, probably, and then, again, without knowing what elements of shadow governments could have been involved. I mean, who would truly have the clearances required to know any of this information for sure without hallucinating like a goof? I mean, I'm pretty sure the majority of MINDSHOCK listeners or any listeners on or any internet users are not in that category. So let's look at the rundown here. A few eyewitnesses say the trenchcoaters were definitely into the vampire game. Jordana Spavin, a friend of Harris and Klebold, document 18,154. Jordana also advised that both Eric and Dylan role-played LARP, live-action roleplay. This game is based on the book Vampire the Masquerade. Dylan and Eric are into vampires, and all their clan will be warned by pagers or cell phone before the next incident occurs. That is a quote, ladies and gentlemen. So, for everything that's been discussed on Columbine, online, and in the media, I'm not sure enough focus has put into vampires specifically. I mean, because who talks about vampires in relation to Columbine? But we're going to do it here on MINDSHOCK because we are comprehensive and exhaustive. That's the name of the game here. So, an unknown substitute at Mesa Ridge High School, neighboring county, quote, and again, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, with all of the school shootings either planned or alleged to have been planned with arrests, not just in the Colorado area of where there was a ton, but in all over the U.S. as well, and Canada, a little bit of Canada. So this is an unknown substitute. I don't know where the source is for this one. This would be curious to see this source. Quote, he stated the trenchcoat mafia are goths that believe they are vampires, that to join the trenchcoat mafia, you have to be cut on either forearm, your blood is collected and drank by the other person present. The Colorado Springs chapter was called Malcavia, the Denver chapter was called Gengrial, the Pueblo chapter was called Toreadors, and it is unknown what the Littleton chapter was called. Now, I'm probably going to forget to go over this, so I'm going to do it here for a more legit, so-called legit source, but that coincidence theorists like, the New York Times. Maybe some people have heard of it. Eerie parallels are seen to shootings at Columbine by Jody Wilgerin, March 23, 2005. He is said to have worn a trench coat and listened to Marilyn Manson, the goth icon. He expressed his admiration for Hitler on a neo-Nazi website, and in the midst of a murderous rampage at his high school, Jeff Weiss asked a classmate if he believed in God, then shot him, one student recounted in a local newspaper. As details began to emerge about Mr. Weiss's shooting spree on an Indian reservation in northern Minnesota, there are eerie echoes of the nation's most infamous school tragedies 6 years ago at Columbine High School near Littleton, Colorado. At Columbine, the killers, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, belonged to the Trenchcoat Mafia and loved all things goth. Now, again, it's kind of an interesting thing, because I've been researching this case for quite a bit, and I've obviously been exposed to media at the time that it happened. I don't remember so much focus being put on them specifically being goth. Yes, violent, wrote about violent things and death and destruction and wore trench coats and loved playing the game Doom, among other violent video games, and listening to German rock bands. However, were they specifically described as goth? Because in their photos, like, other than the trench coats, are they really goth? I mean, who would, compared to the modern notion of goth, who would look at just random photos of these guys and just instantaneously think, oh, they're goths? I mean, there's other people in the Trenchcoat Mafia, especially some of the female members, who you would say, oh, this is definitely a goth. But Harris and Klebold, specifically, just they're goths? I mean, I don't remember this kind of focus. But again, this is an article from 2005, again, stating that they were in the Trenchcoat Mafia. Because some of the revisionist history goofs like to pretend that they actually weren't in the Trenchcoat Mafia, and I've gone over this ad nauseum. Now, you can play semantics games on whether they were official members or unofficial members, but they've both stated that they were members to various different people, and their school projects revealed as such as well. Continuing this article here, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold belonged to the Trenchcoat Mafia and loved all things goth. I'm going to say that one more time. Loved all things goth. That's an interesting statement. They sometimes did a Nazi salute while bowling and planned their attack for Hitler's birthday. Before killing one student, witnesses said one of them held a gun to her temple and asked if she believed in God. My heart just sank like, oh my God, I thought of that day. Tom Mauser, whose son Daniel was among the 15 people killed at Columbine, recalled of his reaction upon first learning of the Minnesota massacre. We kind of just knew there was a good chance it was going to happen again. Describing Mr. Weiss's black, spiky hair and black goth clothes, Ashley Morrison, a fellow student at Red Lake High School, told the Associated Press, he looks like one of those guys at the Littleton School. Beyond these particular similarities, experts on school shootings said Mr. Weiss appears to fit squarely into a pattern of disaffected youth who struggle to fit in at homogeneous schools in rural or suburban areas, then erupt in violence to seek attention, enact revenge, and gain power over people who have taunted them. They interpret his internet postings as an outcast's quest to belong to something larger, another common thread in school shootings. Reports of Mr. Weiss drawing gory pictures in class were classic warning signs of what was to come, they say. I'm going to have to counter that because, in my experience, again, the countless students drew the craziest, most violent things, and they were just the nicest people. But continuing with this article, quote, it typically happens in small, remote towns because the protagonist is a boy who is socially incapable in many ways, said Catherine Newman, a sociologist at Princeton University and the editor of Rampage, The Social Roots of School Shootings. Published last year, this is someone who is a failed joiner who is repeatedly trying to gain access to peer groups that reject him, end quote. I'm also not quite sure about that. I mean, I'm sure there's people that fall into that category, but again, with these false dichotomies and hasty generalizations, like how many of these kids wanted to be jocks or whatever? I mean, maybe some of them, yeah, but some of them, I don't know. If they have more artistic pursuits, they're not necessarily going to be, going into that, but... While the Columbine killers came from stable families in a well-off suburb, Mr. Weiss, who the authorities said was 16, lived on a reservation where 40% of the people are poor and without his parents. His race belies any pattern. 27 of the 28 school gunmen from 92 to 2002 were white, and Michael Kimmel, a sociologist at the State University of New York Stony Brook, who studied them. In 34 postings to Nazi.org, a forum operated by the Libertarian National Socialist Green Party that the authorities said Tuesday were investigating for hints to motive, someone identifying himself as Jeff Weiss, a high school student on the Red Lake Indian Reservation, expressed frustration at the lack of racial purity and pride among his people. Calling himself Native Nazi, or Todsengel, German for Angel of Death, Mr. Weiss said he had found few sympathizers for his racial views and had sometimes been persecuted for them. I already had a fist fight with a communist not too long ago over me being who I am. I also won, but it was worth it, he wrote May 26, 2:27 a.m. In another post, Mr. Weiss complained that less than 1% of the people on the reservation can speak their own language and said that his peers eschewed their culture to emulate rappers. He said his parents were American Indians, but that they had German, Irish, and French Canadian ancestry as well, and that when he had spoken of the need for his tribe to have more pure bloods, he was called a racist. Mr. Weiss also frequently contributed to stories about zombies on an internet forum called Rise of the Dead. According to the Associated Press, Parson Graves Jr., a Red Lake student, told the AP that Mr. Weiss had displayed a sketch of a guitar strumming skeleton captioned, quote, "March to the death song till your boots fill with blood," end quote, in class, and had shown off his drawings of people shooting each other. Paul Violas, author of the 2001 book Avoiding Violence in Our Schools, said the Nazi issue is a collateral issue, a way for someone not on the football team or in the popular clique to find an identity. This individual found some type of solace, he said. People who monitor neo-Nazi groups said the Libertarian Forum frequented by Mr. Weiss is a little-known, internet-only organization with no known links to violence whose niche is to welcome people of all races who oppose race mixing. That's kind of interesting, okay. As for the unlikely prospect of an American Indian Nazi, Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center said African Americans, Jews, and gays have all been members of racial hate groups. Kids like this feel extremely powerless and they want to associate with the oppressor, not the oppressed, he said. That's where you get this bizarre phenomenon of people joining movements that aim to exterminate them or people like them. In an article posted Tuesday on Nazi.org, the group refused to wring hands over the shootings, instead saying such events are to be expected when thinking people are crammed into an unthinking, irrational modern society. Wow. Okay, that's an interesting quote there. So the other thing that nobody really talks about is if, like, let's just talk theoretically here. Just purely theoretical. If the CIA were to engage in some kind of MKUltra type experiment where they were going to recruit disaffected youth, so to speak, or youth with mental issues in order to stage some kind of events like shootings, again, not saying that happened here in any of these cases. This is MINDSHOCK. I do not claim anything is true or untrue. For the Dunning-Kruger crowd, I will say that again. This is MINDSHOCK, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I do not make any claims of any kind that anything is true or untrue other than empirical definitions of words that anybody can verify in the dictionary. I do support basic English comprehension and logic and reason in the scientific method. That's pretty much the only claims made here. So, okay, in regard to this theoretical, would the CIA recruit, and again, MKUltra, a known, admitted, by documentation, operation that occurred on U.S. citizens? So if that and again, you have to think, if the U.S. government was willing to admit what they already admitted with MKUltra, what would they not admit? Would operations such as these, if they theoretically were carried out theoretically, would they look for some kind of disaffected youth? Would they communicate through all these forums? Would they seek to recruit from various internet websites such as these, either with or without the knowledge of the hosts or the people that run the websites? Because a lot of coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists, like, they don't have the mental capacity to understand compartmentalization or useful idiots or the fact that literally as few people as possible would be in the know. If the theory is true, again, I'm not alleging it is, but if it is, obviously it could only be successfully carried out if very few people knew about it. Okay, let's go back to Starviego's post now. The company released a press release in response to some media articles that hinted that LARP games were involved in Columbine. I contacted White Wolf in Georgia, but only elicited a quote from someone at the company. Conrad Hubbard responded, quote, "Evil comes in many forms, but it is never so dangerous as when it is convenient," end quote, from Ravenloft. Okay. That's interesting. Here are some references that are of interest. Quote, "Satanism wore itself out in the 1980s, said J. Gordon Melton, a socio-historian and director of the Institute for the Study of American Religion in Santa Barbara, California, IA. Now it's vampirism," end quote. That's curious. Columbine High School Yearbook, page 135. Quote, "Hunger rushing through his veins." Let's see what this is, because there's no context here. Let's look at 135. And something that I mention all the time as well is, so the Columbine So the Columbine shooting happened in 99. The 99 yearbook is available. However, does anybody find it curious that the 98 yearbook is not available? The 97 is available, but the 96 is not. So that's kind of curious. That's kind of curious, especially for those that believe that there may have been more individuals involved or with knowledge with possible connections to some kind of government agencies. So what are they hiding in the yearbooks that have not been released? Now, I know people had physical yearbooks and they have sold them on eBay and other websites. And obviously the students that went to those, that were in those grades, they have physical copies. I'm not alleging that no physical copies exist or none that were made. I'm saying I find it curious that online there seems to have been a wipe, or if they were never scanned in the first place, because you can find yearbooks from the 70s and 80s and other yearbooks from the 90s, including that year and 97, just not 98 or 96. What does that suggest? I mean, that does anybody find that kind of weird? I think that might be kind of weird. I'm just saying. And there are a lot of other weird things in the yearbook. In various yearbooks. I will be going over them on another podcast, but let's stay on topic with the vampirism here. Okay. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, this quote, this is stretching it a little bit. So let's go to page 135. Hunger rushing through his veins, Jason Ramsauer prepares to devour a slice of pizza that he bought at the school cafeteria. The outdoors was a favorite lunch spot. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't connect to vampirism for me, unless there's theories that there's some kind of there's a lot of codes in the yearbook, which maybe there is. We'll be going over the yearbook in another episode, but that's not damning to me. Continuing on here, this is a quote from Brooke NP. Some of the TCM even wear white pancake makeup and dark eyeliner, one student said. Quote, it was that devilish, half-dead, half-alive look, end quote, said Brett, a 16-year-old sophomore who spoke only on the condition his first name be used. Dave Williams, a police expert who has been studying the Goths for 6 years, told the Chronicle that by and large they are nonviolent. Quote, I always was afraid something like this might happen, end quote, said Williams, a sergeant in the Dayton, Ohio Police Department. Sergeant Williams says some Goths act out a bizarre and elaborate role-playing game, Vampire the Masquerade. He said one particularly dark aspect of the Gothic is when role-playing is carried to the extreme. The game, Vampire the Masquerade, I call it Dungeons and Dragons on steroids, he said, adding that players assume the persona of vampires and act out attacks. There are people who I have seen who lose touch, who think the gaming system and mythos are real. They have gone off and done some very strange things. Basing things on my experience, is there a propensity for this? It's possible. Trench coats like those worn by the Colorado gunmen are the modern equivalent of vampire capes in the symbology of the game, Williams said. As part of the game, Williams said participants join one of 7 clans associated with vampirism. The 7 clans compete for power in the vampire world. The idea of the game is to essentially control the world. Where have we seen that before? One clan, known as the Bruja, is the most violent among the game's participants. Another group, which is outside the clan system, is known as Sabbat, and makes random simulated violent attacks on opponents in the game. But Williams said the game requires players to totally immerse themselves in the study of the occult. Any belief system taken to the extreme is dangerous, he said. In this one, ultimately, the fanaticism causes the problem, Williams said. You are steeped in the occult, you are reading about the occult, you are sucking so much of this in, it's a huge indoctrination. That has a tendency of messing with the mind. Williams said he became interested in the game itself while involved in a homicide investigation. I had to walk away from it, he said. And of course, there have been a bunch of cases that are associated with this, and let's look at some of them. Case histories. The Rod Ferrell case is interesting. November 25th, 96. 2 teenage boys stole into the home of Rick and Ruth Wendorf in Eustis, Florida. The Wendorfs were bludgeoned to death. The boys pocketed some of the valuables from the house, then stole the family Ford Explorer. It seemed like a fairly routine burglary gone bad. It wasn't. The first complication was that Wendorf's 15-year-old daughter, Heather, was missing. It turned out she had run off that very night with the 2 boys and 2 other girls. They were all captured in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. 3 days later. And of course, Baton Rouge associated with vampires as well. The second complication was that the older boy, Rod Ferrell, professed to be a vampire and claimed his companions were members of his coven. Suspicion quickly arose that Heather Wendorf was involved in the death of her parents. Rod Ferrell was a troubled boy. He claims he was molested during a black mass that his grandfather made him attend. Now here we get into the satanic ritual abuse. If you haven't checked that out on MINDSHOCK, I did an extensive multi-hour podcast on all the evidence of satanic ritual abuse, the satanic panic disinfo campaign, and also snuff films specifically associated with satanic ritual abuse. Tons of documentation and prosecution, so you can only imagine what else is out there, just based on the amount that has been definitively documented. He was fascinated by role-playing games, graduating from Dungeons & Dragons to Vampire the Masquerade. He was Visago, his pale arms pricked with self-inflicted cuts, a wooden walking stick clasped in his hand. She was Zoe, her purple hair and black fishnet stockings set off by a mangled Barbie doll dangling from her backpack. See, this is the other thing I always kind of, I wonder why more effort isn't put into this, into just starting more artistic or film programs earlier. Because if people, whether, their abuse was real or not, but even if it was real, I mean, art is, of course, a great outlet, to just get into film. And then you could do all of these violent acts for fake with no real victims and make money off of it. And again, I'm not going to get into the ethical or moral quandary of whether or not that promotes even more cyclical damage and opens that Pandora's box, so to speak, because there's so many conflicting studies on that subject, on how violent video games or movies or whatever, that's kind of like an outlet, so then there's less curiosity to go and commit those acts yourself. And yeah, I mean, just the amount of people that play violent video games and watch violent movies, I mean, what is 99+% never actually go kill anybody or commit Grand Theft Auto just because they saw it. So yeah, you have to consider that as well. But I can only wonder, especially with Columbine, too. I mean, these were smart, creative kids. If there was more of an outreach program or just some kind of a method for them to get not just recognition, but money, I mean, just accomplishment from their creativity, violent or not, so that way they would never actually have to commit any real acts of violence. And not just them, but in all these other cases as well. Because, violent criminals or not, a lot of these people are very creative. So if they had more outlets early on to preempt any of this violence and just found so much success in life, I mean, why would they ever need to commit real violence? And again, that's not a substitute for any kind of mental health help or any of those things. While in high school in Kentucky, he fell in with a band of game players who were adopting Vampire the Masquerade as a lifestyle. Rod became convinced he was a vampire and that his friends were kindred spirits. They would hang around cemeteries and perform bloodletting rituals. But Rod saw himself as the true Prince of Darkness, son of Satan, the Antichrist. He chafed at conforming to the rules of the group, so he decided to gather one of his own. In the WAG cafeteria, is that short for cafeteria? Their old classmates whispered darkly of a battle between two rival clans of blood-sucking fiends. In October 95, he met some unidentified adults who involved him in a human blood-drinking ceremony. Okay, hold on a second here. So this is where I have to interject the idea, yes, let's not fall for false dichotomies. It is possible that there's all these just random adults that are into the occult and all of this. Is it also possible that CIA or government operatives would infiltrate or pose as some of these individuals in order to gain influence and as part of a greater MK Ultra agenda? Again, I'm not saying this theory is true, but if it's true, would that be the most effective way to accomplish something like this? And of course, there is precedent in other areas of them doing this, in drug culture and all these other spheres. Why wouldn't they do it in the occult sphere as well? Ferrell claims they made him believe he was one of the undead with powers over any living being. And it was this crossing over to vampiredom which in November 96 eventually led him to three local friends, Dana Cooper, 19, Scott Anderson, 16, and Charity Kesey, 16, to drive to Eustis, Florida, where police allege they used a sharpened crowbar to bludgeon to death Richard and Naoma Wendorf, the parents of Ferrell's 15-year-old girlfriend, Heather Wendorf. A V sign surrounded by circular marks was burned into Wendorf's body. Police said it was the sign of Ferrell's vampire clan, and each circular mark represented a clan member. He may have had a troubled family life as well. His mother, Sandra Gibson, pled guilty in Kentucky last November to trying to entice a 14-year-old boy into having sex as part of a vampire initiation ritual? Okay. Scott Anderson told police that Ferrell took him to a cemetery, made cuts in his arm, then drank my blood. Yet Ferrell's arrest has left many questions unanswered. Law officers in Kentucky doubt that he was a cult leader. Instead, they're investigating a number of adults suspected of initiating dozens of local youths, or Utes, as Joe Pesci would say, and are taking the talk of rival gangs seriously. We have just scratched the surface of vampirism in Kentucky, says Murray Sheriff Stan Scott. There are many more involved in the valley than just Ferrell's group. Right now, I think most of them are lying low. Rod's group was led by a woman from New Orleans who was a friend of Sandra Gibson's, Rod's mother. The others follow two women from Houston, Texas. They are really vicious, and I think Rod was afraid of them. However far-fetched it sounds, police in Houston confirmed that since '94, there have been a series of ritual biting incidents. Marshall Varus, a Dallas psychologist, says that in the last 12 months he had treated 15 teenagers who say they are vampires. Patricia Seymour, a psychiatric counselor, says that in the last 3 years she's had 50 clients from the Houston region who have emotional problems stemming from their vampire fantasies. I mean, this makes me think, is this still an ongoing issue? You don't really hear about it now. Particularly in the late 90s, there was a lot of talk of this, of people who thought they were vampires, the overlap with goth culture, and just a lot of this. I haven't heard any of this lately, other than the odd singular case here and there. We're talking dozens and dozens in one city area alone here. All of them say they've met a shadowy woman who calls herself Clyte. Clyte has since been identified as Alice Lynn Shapiro. I wonder if she's related to Ben Shapiro, who is wanted for assault and fraud in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Shapiro disappeared after she and 3 others were arrested for torturing a 17-year-old boy during a vampire rite in November '95. Clyte's alleged victim, whose identity has not been revealed, was in a coma for 5 days after living through 4 days of terror. He was sexually assaulted, a man threatened to cut out his tongue, and then he was set on fire. I believe the devil has my daughter Kesey's soul, he says. I can't explain her behavior any other way. And that, says Gordon Welton, editor of the vampire book Encyclopedia of the Undead, is part of the problem. Okay, let's look at another incident here. This was published Tuesday, January 20th, 98, Associated Press. Vampire-like activity started with role-playing. Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Lonely young people should be wary of a central Wisconsin group that offers companionship but engages in vampire-like activity, former members say. Quote, know what you're getting into and do not be forced into it, former member Aaron Thurber said. Do not be brainwashed, end quote. Of course, that's easier said than done. The group started out as a role-playing game and then went bad, according to Thurber, another former member and a current member. We started playing the role-playing games of Vampire Masquerade, Thurber told the Marshfield News-Herald, as quoted in Monday's edition. That's when the group's leader started getting delusional. The group, dubbed the Hissers by Wisconsin Rapids police, became known after an October Razor attack. The attacker, reportedly one of the group's leaders, licked the blood off the knife, police said. A Stevens Point man last month entered an insanity plea to a battery charge in the attack. The victim suffered an 8-inch gash on the torso. Group members would also mix wine with blood, stay in during the day, and sharpen their fingernails so they could tear into people. Thurber said members would gather at The Haunt an abandoned homestead in Wisconsin Rapids, Thurber said, where they would light bonfires and perform rituals. The role-playing game was used as a cover, Thurber said. We were playing before, but then they started slicing each other with razor blades until near unconsciousness. That's when we thought it was going too far. It was a role-playing game that went into fanaticism. The vampire group preys on high schoolers who are looking for someone to care for them, Thurber said. We had bad grades or participated in criminal activities. We did not fit in. We had no friends or family, nowhere to go, Thurber said. The former members warned that people should be aware of the group and the power it has on outcasts, and they offered some advice. Wow, this is getting really dark. January 2nd, 2003, vampire fan's head found in a river. The frozen head of a man who was devoted to vampire role-playing games has been found in a Swedish river. Marcus Noren's decapitated head was discovered by children, wow, this is terrible, in the icy Nissan River in Halmstad. Police said they were not certain how the 22-year-old was killed, but they believe he was murdered. Spokesman Lars Hamren said several people have been interrogated, including members of a local club who take part in live-action role-playing games. Swedish media reported that the games included simulations of vampire life and lore, a variant of role-playing with strong elements of occultism and romanticism of death. Hamren said he did not know if there was any connection between the club and the murder. One of Noren's friends said he often devoted his time to a vampire game called Vampire the Masquerade. You have many roles and fight each other for power, Marcus Brisman said January 2nd, 2003. And I wonder if there's an update here. Yeah, I really couldn't find much here. Apparently Marcus Noren was having a night out on the town, Halmstad. Never made it home that night. No one saw him again. 3 days later, the day before New Year's Eve, again, we have some occult references here, 2 American kids who were visiting Sweden over the holidays were outside playing. They thought his head was a ball out on the frozen Nissan River. They realize it's a human head frozen solid in the river. I mean, this is the stuff nightmares are made. I mean, I don't know how those kids could recover from that. I mean, it doesn't say the age of those kids, but there's actually one update here. Yeah, this is the only update I could find. This was in the Aftonbladet newspaper, January 3rd, 2003, so the following day. 2 men arrested for dismemberment murder. Under suspicion of murder. A 46-year-old man is suspected of murdering Marcus Noren, and a 28-year-old man is suspected for aiding the murder. The older man has admitted some of the points. The night the body of Marcus Noren was carried out of an apartment in central Halmstad. The police were secretive directly after the arrest, but at a press conference during Friday evening, the chief investigator, Lars Hamren, could confirm that the older man is facing a charge of murder and a younger man is facing a charge of aiding a murder. At the same time as the press conference, a car arrived at the apartment in central Halmstad. The remains of Marcus Noren were carried out and taken to the morgue. Wait, so they did find the rest of them? The night before, the police had received some very interesting pieces of info. This became conclusive for solving the case. During the day, the police put on a search for the 2 men and placed the apartment under... Well, how did they know about the 2 men? It doesn't say here. Apartment under surveillance. Around 2 p.m., the 2 men arrived. They were immediately arrested and taken to the police station in Halmstad. The 2 suspects are formally known by the police, both in cases of crimes and violence. Okay, so they already knew about them? The older man admitted to some points during the early interrogations. The younger man denies involvement in any crime. During the Friday evening press conference, the police dismissed all speculations of connection to the role-playing games that Marcus Noren played. Furthermore, there is no info pointing towards any previous connection between the 2 suspects and Marcus Noren. Sidebar, this story so far, December 27th, Marcus Noren, 22, leaves his place of work at a video rental in the center of Halmstad at around 9 p.m. At midnight, he returns to receive the keys to the store. After this, he visits several bars in Halmstad, ending up at the restaurant La Cucaracha. Wait a second, why does he need to return at midnight? He leaves his work at 9, returns at midnight to receive the keys to the store? I guess this was translated from Swedish, but I don't know. Okay, he ends up at the restaurant La Cucaracha. December 28th, 3:40 a.m., Marcus Noren knocks on the window of the closed restaurant. La Cucaracha. This is the last time he is seen alive. And that's kind of weird. Why is he knocking on the window of the closed restaurant? Like, what's the story there? December 30th, a 10-year-old boy and his 13-year-old sister find a severed human head frozen in the ice of the Nissan River. December 31st, rescue divers find additional body parts and pieces of clothing in the river. January 1st, the police hope to gain valuable clues from the cell phone of Marcus Noren. Okay, so, wait a second. They said there's no connection between the two suspects and Noren, so what could his cell phone provide? Other than possibly a witness, maybe. Does anybody else find it kind of weird that there's almost no information on this case? Okay, I found one more. Believe it or not, Tumblr. The one and only Tumblr has the most information on this case. So Tumblr Crime Europe had this right up here. December 27th, 2002, 22-year-old Marcus Noren had been working late at his job in the local video store, waiting for his colleagues to finish their shifts so he could lock up and take the keys as he had to open up the store the next morning. Okay, so it seems like if the video store didn't close until midnight and they only had one pair of keys, so that's why he left and come back? Maybe. When Marcus returned home that night, he had plans to go out and party in the town of Halmstad, Sweden. Although he didn't plan to stay out for long, it was the last time Marcus would be seen alive. Worried sick, Marcus's mother, Agneta, reported him missing to the police 2 days later. The following day, December 30th, 2 American children, 10 and 12 years old, who were visiting Sweden over the holidays, who were playing in the frozen Nissan River, made a gruesome discovery: a human head frozen in the river. The children alerted their families, who called the police, and a murder investigation was launched. Police, drivers, rescue services, and technicians were called to the river to initiate the search. Within days, divers swam along the ice on the river, and in the end, on New Year's Eve, they found 2 human legs. It was confirmed that the head and the legs were, in fact, Marcus Noren's. On January 2nd, 2003, a man stepped into the police station in Halmstad and explained how his 47-year-old son, the same morning, had asked for 10,000 krona and told him that he and a 28-year-old would leave town. The man at the police station had read about the finds in the Nissan River, and since the discovery, the son had been behaving strangely and was afraid he was involved in the murder. Okay, so his father tipped the popo off. Okay. The next day, January 3rd, the police decided to visit the 47-year-old man's apartment, which was located in a complex known for drugs. In the apartment, they found the rest of Marcus's body under a bed cover in the bathroom, which had been in his apartment for several days. What? Does this make sense, then? Has this ever happened before? So instead of getting rid of the whole body, they just chop off the head and the legs, leave the rest of the body in their own apartment, and just throw the head and the legs in the river? Is this making sense to anybody? And they just put the body under a bed cover in the apartment and just leave it there for days. So they don't use the bathroom. What? Okay, this is weird. Chlorine had been used in an attempt to clean up the crime scene, and dried bloodstains could be seen throughout the apartment. That same day, the 47-year-old was arrested along with his 28-year-old resident. It was uncovered that Marcus had encountered the 28-year-old at the restaurant the night he disappeared. He then went with both the 28-year-old to the 47-year-old's apartment, where they continued to drink beer and an argument occurred. Is that common in Sweden, where you meet somebody, like a guy meets another guy and they go drinking at the guy's apartment? I mean, I'm trying to think, like, would you meet a random stranger, you make a friend, and then you go to some other guy's apartment to drink? I mean, if it's a party, yes, but if it's not a party, unless they said it was a party, there was some kind of pretense of a party. It also doesn't state here what the argument was, if you want to allege this was possibly some kind of initiation of a drug deal. But what's the deal with him knocking on the closed restaurant window? Because it says here he encountered the 28-year-old at the restaurant. But then apparently, so who left where? And was he knocking on the restaurant on his own after it closed? Huh. The 47-year-old man was quick to acknowledge the murder of Marcus, while the 28-year-old claimed his innocence throughout the trial. The 28-year-old claimed he left the apartment for a short period of time, and when he returned, he saw Marcus lying dead in the living room. He claimed he had only helped his 47-year-old friend carry away the body parts for disposal. The murder verdict was appealed, and the 47-year-old was instead sentenced for manslaughter and crimes against peace. He was sentenced to 9 years. After 1 year, he was pardoned by the government when he was fatally ill with liver cancer. He died shortly after in Helmstead Hospital. The 28-year-old was charged with gross protection of criminals and drug crimes and was sentenced to 1 year, 9 months in prison. The judgment was extremely controversial. In addition, there were a lot of circumstances that were never addressed during the trial, which for several years have left many people baffled and the important question unanswered. Was it the right man who was sentenced for the murder of Marcus, or is the murderer now free to kill again? So that's really all I could find anywhere. So this whole thing does seem very strange. Because if they're getting rid of the body, why leave it for days? Why not just throw the whole body in the river? Why decapitate the head and the legs? I mean, none of this really makes any sense. It almost seems like there's some weird funny business going on here. And also how adamant the police were to say that this has nothing to do with the game. Because how would they know exactly? I mean, it's just the whole thing's kind of weird. Just looking at other sources here, it looks like there were over 300,000 people that were active in role-playing in Sweden. It doesn't specifically say Vampire Masquerade. Lars Hamren stated that the speculation that he should have been killed and dismembered in a violent roleplay gone wrong are just speculation. That actually kind of makes more sense in a certain way, because why are they randomly... Like, you know, you get into a fight with somebody, they end up dead. But why are they randomly decapitating and chopping his legs off? I mean, there seems to be something more there. And according to this Tumblr write-up, like, all this... there's a lot of unanswered questions in the case. I mean, that seems to be... That's definitely sure. I mean, the more they try to downplay links to the game, it almost seems like it's more likely there were links to the game. But let's go back to Star Viego's write-up here. In some occasions, murder, violence, and other crimes have been blamed on role-playing among the perpetrators. 2 brothers, 16 and 17 years old, killed in '94, a 15-year-old friend from school by their own admission under the influence of role-playing games. No further info on that one. Texas Teen Vampires Go on a Rampage by J. Jordan, Associated Press, March 6, 98. In Dallas, Texas, 4 teenagers claiming to be vampires went on a drug-crazed destruction spree, vandalizing dozens of cars and homes, spray-painting racial slurs, and burning down the office and fellowship hall of Bethany Lutheran Church. Okay, now let's go... Wow. What? Okay, we're going into MINDSHOCK land. So, back to Tara Becker, 1985, student from Columbine High School. Tara brought with her a booklet she had helped to compile for one of her school classes. This booklet was called Masquerade and was full of subliminal pictures and prose. Tara explained how she had been taught to use the hidden, double-meaning subliminals and how she focused so much of her time and attention on death that she herself had tried to commit suicide. And again, if you have not checked out death education classes, of which Columbine was one of the first schools, or at least the main school profiled on the news, check it out. I went over this in episode 1. It is still one of the most mind-shocking aspects of the entire Columbine case. But specifically to have a booklet called Masquerade where she was specifically taught to use hidden double-meaning subliminals, I mean, that's classic occult symbolism. And the booklet is called Masquerade. So Vampire Masquerade officially came out in 1991. And I wonder what the inspiration for that was, too, as well. Because they have these death education classes in the 80s with these occult symbology booklets, Masquerade. You know what would be really crazy? I mean, this would be incredibly crazy if Vampire the Masquerade, if there were some kind of links to Columbine specifically and Death Education. And by the way, White Wolf is based in Stockholm, Sweden, so it is in Sweden. I think that's possibly why there was so much attention in that case. In Marcus Noren's case, because that's Sweden. So, yeah. Okay, so here is from Blood Shadows Night 54, a Denver LARP group, May 1st, 1999. There's a reference in this Denver area website of a Denver area game-playing group. The Games Master note, the Columbine situation. Yes, it happened in-game. Yes, it will have ramifications on the game world just as it does the real world. You can presume that there has been some the same outcry in the Blood Shadows world as there had been in Denver over the last couple weeks. But I will not bring this into play in terms of role-playing having anything having to do with it. I'm not going to write up any news stories or import anything that was actually written. I'm not going to make that the subject of some plot outline in a game and reduce its significance to the people who were affected. Basically, you can assume that it happened, but I will not allow anyone to take advantage of it. Research it to any degree. Please focus on the plot lines I've already given out. They're quite horrible enough without trivializing a tragedy that has touched so many. Okay, this is one of the most bizarre comments I've ever read in any conspiracy. It's almost like there's an allegation confirming the conspiracy, but then shutting down any further examination of it. So it's like an admittance without any allowance for investigation. Has anybody ever seen that in any... This is just really weird. So Star Viego again quoted, yes, it happened in-game. I mean, can you get any more blunt than that? So Star Viego said, this sounded to me like the LARPers were pre-enacting the Columbine event before it happened, though the webmaster denied it when I emailed her. Now, of course, the webmaster would probably deny everything in relation to this. But what's curious, I read that it happened in-game as if whoever shot up the school were doing it as a role play. That's how I read it. Star Viego is reading it as if it was a pre-enactment, or like there were rehearsals for this, as if it happened in-game. I mean, you could read it either way, I guess. I mean, what do all the MINDSHOCK listeners think here? But this makes me all think, so the Doom game, where supposedly Eric Harris made a level that looked exactly like Columbine High School. I might have to do an entire podcast on Doom. So as someone who has played the original Doom and various other sequels and Doom clones, there's something very unsettling about that game. Interdimensional demons and portals to Mars and all that. Now, I once looked up the origin of the game, and supposedly there are some kind of connections similar to the Illuminati card game. And I'm not going to get into that here because this isn't about Doom. But perhaps I'll have to do an episode dedicated to Doom, not even necessarily specifically in relation to Columbine, because there's some very weird things with the game Doom, and how it was made and how it was released and by whom. But let's continue here. So, Star Viego also has some quotes here from the documentation. Tad Bowles, another one of supposedly an original Trenchcoat Mafia member. Some people actually credit him as the founder. Document 10,656. Quote, almost everyone had swords for collection purposes, end quote. Frank Brown, document 7,432. Owner of a store selling large knives and swords. Harris had his business card in his wallet. Will Graber, document 5,599. Joe Stair carried a box of swords in his vehicle. Stair would clean them while on break at work. Okay, wow. I've actually never heard of anybody not only always permanently transporting their sword collection in their vehicle, but specifically cleaning them on break from work. I mean, did he do this every day? How often was this? That's weird. Charles Phillips, 10,867. swords and knives found during the search of his home, and if you haven't checked out the Phillips issues, I've gone over them and his connection to the Trenchcoat Mafia. Aaron Adams, 6041, Trenchcoat Mafia was into fencing with swords. Document 10,551 by Redacted. Wow, this is a damning one. Is everybody ready for this? Witnesses a LARP game with swords among Trenchcoat Mafia members in the summer of 1998. So this is Redacted that witnessed this. Okay, next up, Pauline Colby, document 6260. She stated the male members of the group would spar with each other using bamboo martial arts sticks. David Caravan, another very curious individual we've gone over in previous episodes, document 6218, owns a bladed staff, a long pole with a blade at the end of it. Arrested for curfew violations. Steve Trulio, document 4649, says Chris Morris told him he did know how to use medieval weapons. John Skeels, document 5404, says Morris talked about medieval torture often in history class. Eric Dutro, document 10687, says that Joe Stair likes to roleplay. Matt Reich, document 5632, best friend of Perry, describes a LARP game played with dice, maps, and other paraphernalia. Redacted was a dungeon master or developer and moderator of a game scenario which involved combat situations. Redacted played with Chris Morris and Joe Stair. Redacted was an avid gamer. So supposedly Redacted is Robert Perry here. DK Diversion File 53 of 80. Reports of Dylan sleeping in class. This is evidence of nighttime activity, possibly of a LARP nature, as these games are mostly played in the dark. Also, documents 987 by Marquardt, Rathbun 5085, Smith 5099, Davis 5597, 10,542, and Dykeman 10,693. And document 10,509, reference to Klebold sleeping over at a person's house other than Harris once a month or every other weekend. Whatever they were doing on those sleepovers, I'm pretty sure it wasn't sleeping. And we might have to do dedicated episodes on the night missions, which may or may not be related to LARPing here with Vampire Masquerade. But I've gone over them briefly. Apparently there were just night missions, violent acts, fights, leaving pipe bombs places by Harris Klebold and or associates. Stephanie Salmon, document 548, library witness. She specifically told investigative officer it did not appear as though the suspects were mad, but were just having fun. Well, that's ominous, no matter how you look at it. Aaron Wright, document 4785. Before April 20th, they heard 3 seniors say to Harris, quote, "The war is over, you can go home," end quote. Harris replied, quote, "Shut up, a-hole," end quote. Yeah, I don't know if that's related to a game scenario, or they're just making fun, but Harris, was he not wearing his trench coat? Or combat gear? I don't know. Supposedly this might be in reference to a game scenario. Kristen Long, 5027. Harrison Klebold, Dykeman, and Morris would talk about, quote, hurting each other and about playing the game. I mean, I guess that could relate to a computer game as well. Shane Michael Cray, document 5905. In the cafeteria, sees gunmen firing shots at random. He could have shot many more people had he wanted to, but instead he was shooting most of the rounds toward the ceiling. Star Viego has a note here. This implies that there was another purpose other than killing a large number of victims, which, again, just on the surface, basic common sense, they had all those students just under tables, and they could have obviously shot way more people if they wanted to. I mean, I don't know if anybody could dispute that. And obviously Denver, the Denver area, not a small or low population area by any stretch of the imagination. And some researchers online have uncovered a website. I mean, roleplaying-directory.com no longer up, but they had a subsection here, Top Games Role-Playing Live-Action Horror World of Darkness Chronicles Vampire the Masquerade, which actually had a section here in the Denver area. You can go on Wayback Machine and go on their website. Welcome to Denver After Dark, live-action Vampire the Masquerade in Denver, Colorado. Typical GeoCities type website. And wow, yeah, so the clans here, as mentioned previously, they do seem to be accurate here. Gangrel, Bruja, Tremere, Ventru, Nosferatu, Toreador, Malkavian. There's the Blood Shadows group previously mentioned, and there's also Sanguis Priscus in the Denver area as well, both Denver. So under Blood Shadows, it states here, we are a live-action group that has been gaming together since '93. We use the Mind's Eye theater system published by White Wolf Publishing. This game is set in Denver and is run for friends and acquaintances of the storyteller. There are openings for new players and narratives. The game typically runs about 45 to 70 people, and you're welcome to join us. The Sanguis Priscus group, even on Wayback Machine, it's not finding their site. So, wow. Okay. Let's continue on with Star Viego's posts here. There were at least 3 websites for Denver area vamps existent on April 20th. Only one is still active as far as I know. Interestingly, there seems to have been a lot of activity on these sites the day after April 21st, although the actual posts are not available anymore. That is curious. But, I mean, they could be completely innocent, though, because there's clearly overlap with the Trenchcoat Mafia. So if a lot of the members were also LARPing here in Vampire the Masquerade, it makes sense that there would be online activity because people would know people and they might have questions, especially if, you know, certain degrees of separation to Eric and Dylan. Matt Acard, the Splatterpunk, document 13,626. They were good with swords. Lance Reno, Arapahoe High School, document 13,460. I then asked Lance if he had been involved in LARPing, and Lance stated that he played the game Vampire the Masquerade, but has never played in real life, only on a board. Lance stated that the game involves the use of guns and knives by the players and can be violent. Note, none of the Trenchcoat Mafia associates in the 11K were asked this question in their official interviews. I mean, that's curious, too. So none of them were asked about Vampire the Masquerade. Only Lance Reno of Arapahoe High School was asked this. The Columbine High School Night Custodian. Whoa. Document 13,467. He sees several students practicing what he called a play in the math hallway until about 9:30 p.m. on April 19th. Wow, I mean, you really can't make this stuff up just with the amount of documentation of what's going on in the days prior, the days after. I mean, this is just insane. Does anybody know? Okay, out of all the MindShock listeners, how many kids were doing anything in a math hallway 9:30 p.m. randomly? So the day before, the night before, mere hours, less than 24 hours before the Columbine shooting, there are several students practicing what the night custodian called a play in the math hallway until about 9:30 p.m. There's actually... This is interesting. There's actually information here on this document, 13,467, about the typical activities and who was there when. So it's actually curious. So the investigator Glenn Moore here from Golden Police Department. So source said she was coming home from work Monday, April 19th, at about 2300 hours, so 11 p.m., and saw 4 vehicles in the north parking lot. 1 white vehicle, 1 green vehicle, unknown on the other vehicles. So the lead here, need to contact school to see who was supposed to be at school on April 19th around 11 p.m. and ID the vehicles. This lead was initially investigated by Detective Demmel and reassigned for closure. The attempt to identify vehicles observed at Columbine High School on the evening of April 19th was addressed in rapid start control numbers. In those leads, 3 brothers provided info about being in school until about 11 p.m. the evening prior to the shooting. So this is Michael, John, and James Sealander. Michael was picked up by his father at about 10 p.m. in the top parking lot, and John left at about 11 p.m. in his own 79 green Ford pickup truck. That's kind of weird, though. Like, why wouldn't he just leave with his own brother? And what were they doing there that late? So again, this is all in the public documentation. All of this information is in the public files. So this isn't even the redacted stuff. This is all unredacted, publicly available, official documentation. The truck was described having been parked in the lot for most of the evening. In those interviews, the Sealanders could not recall having seen other vehicles parked in the lot. They thought John had been the last person to leave the school. Security supervisor Joe Schalmoser was contacted and provided the night supervisor for the custodial staff on that evening. It was Randon Rodart. Schalmoser said he had checked their security records and found that on the evening of April 19th, the alarm had been set at 22:56. And the motion detectors indicated the building was vacant after 23:15. So after 11:15 p.m., it was vacant. Schalmoser said the time period between 22:56 and 23:15 could have been the custodial staff leaving after having set the alarm. Schalmoser added that no subsequent alarms were received that evening. Schalmoser provided a pager number for the on-call custodial supervisor in an effort to contact Randon Rodart. What a name. This was a certain custodial staff that was at the school late that evening as well with their vehicle, which had been parked in the lot. Telephone interview with Rodart. He explained being the night watch custodial supervisor on the night of April 19th. He said there were 5 staff working in the building that evening, including himself. So this included William Hebner, Penny Schroeder, Ron Osendorf, Alan Jungerman, and a substitute known to him only by the first name of Anne. Why is a random substitute teacher there the night before? Is that common for random substitute teachers to be in the school that late? He said they began their shift at 3 p.m. and all but Osendorf left at about 11 p.m. He left at 7:30 p.m. Rodart recalled the only notable observations during their watch were several students practicing in the hallway by the math area who left at about 9:30 p.m. Why would students be practicing in a math hallway? Like, why wouldn't they be somewhere else? I mean, I don't know. He also saw 2 or 3 students in the computer lab apparently using the computers at about 10:30 p.m. He said nothing appeared suspicious, such as any bag or containers having been left lying around the school. So here's the thing, like, if certain students didn't have computers at home, that could make sense. It's kind of weird. Are most schools really open that late? During their rounds late that evening, Rodart recalled seeing 3 unoccupied vehicles in the main lot. He said they were parked in the main lot about 3 rows away from the school entrance. He described these as newer model beige Suburban, a beige Expedition, and a 70s Ford pickup, possibly brown in color. Rodart provided descriptions of the vehicles, and they had all parked in the lot nearest the gymnasium. Their vehicle descriptions were provided as follows. Rodart, 95 salmon-colored Jeep Wrangler. Hebner, 80s gray Nissan pickup truck. Schroeder, 93 blue-gray Toyota Corolla. Osendorf, left at 1930, white Oldsmobile compact car. Youngerman, 90s maroon Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. And Ann, 70s unknown color full-sized Oldsmobile car. Yeah, I mean, that's curious. That's definitely curious. Let's get back to Starviego's post here. Ricky Roth, document 13,484. She dated Robert Perry and played role-playing games with him. Jordana Spavin, Dakota Ridge High School, document 13,547. The game is based on the book Vampire the Masquerade, and when you play, you dress the part of a vampire clan, then one person writes the script and hands it out at the playing location. Jordana believed that Eric and Dylan played in the mountains most of the time, and that their clan used toy weapons, plastic guns, and knives. I asked Jordana what they portray when they play the game, and Jordana stated that it is usually a fight between clans. And Jordana Spavin, which we've gone over quite a few of her quotes in previous episodes, interesting there. Starviego's comment here, I want to know what Jordana's friend Val and sometime poster thinks of all of this. I'm assuming this Val posted on these forums. Star Viego with another post here, August 11, 2004, or at least that's the archive date, could have been earlier. The point of this post is to show the parallels between the vampire players and the trenchcoat mafia. Specifically, trenchcoats, the wearing of all black with makeup, the predilection for nighttime activities, the fascination with swords and guns, satanic worship, game playing, violent fantasies gone out of control, the attraction to the group for outcasts. The fact that witnesses said the trenchcoat mafia were into the game only adds icing to the cake. The Rod Ferrell case is interesting because they refer to adult influence on the players, possibly cult leaders, even crossing intrastate boundaries. I strongly suspect that there were adult players in the Columbine case as well. P.S. Visago sounds like it could fit right in with Imaginos, Excalibur, and Gestor. I am not suggesting that the game itself is the cause for violence at Columbine. Rather, I suggest that the vampire game may have been a vector for the mind control that was really the main reason for the killer's actions. The whole vampire satanic influence theory would have probably been the main motive cited had the other school shooters been tried. Of course, as always, the most suspicious thing about the whole business is the abject refusal of the IOs to pursue this lead, just as they had no interest in exploring what was going on in those sleepovers. But then again, there were so many leads that they didn't follow. So Imaginos, Excalibur, and Gestor were supposedly mentioned in Rebel missions and all of those things, and online nicknames like Reb and Vodka. Now, they may not have been adults, though. Imaginos, Excalibur, and Gestor. I mean, I don't know what Starviego's saying. Visago might be the adult, and the others weren't. I might have to do a dedicated episode. I guess I will do an episode on all the night missions, the Rebel missions, and all of the nicknames and all of that. Some of that information is still unknown, by the way. Woody posted that there were a lot of reports that both Harris and Klebold were sleeping a lot in class the latter part of the year before the shooting. Were they out at nighttime playing LARP? Or Rebel missions or something else entirely. So apparently they weren't sleeping in class in the first part of the year, just the second part of the year, according to witnesses. Okay. Starviego also posted this, October 3rd, 2009, or earlier. Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness are trademarked copyrights from White Wolf Inc. of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Here are some excerpts from the numerous vampire and werewolf-themed books that they have produced. Note the parallels with the attitudes and postures of the Trenchcoat Mafia. The World of Darkness, Vampire the Dark Prince, Keith Heber, HarperCollins Publishers, 1994. Page 204. A little object lesson, Selena replied. What do you know about Darwin, about evolution? She asked him, taking him by the hand to lead him down the darkened path. But the theory I had in mind was the concept of survival of the fittest. The proposition that the strong, the most deserving, should rise to their natural position of dominance in the world. From The Beast Within, A Vampire the Masquerade Anthology, White Wolf Publishing, 94, page 53. Christine swept down the stairs, passing the enigmatic purple robes of a Venetian masker, and took in the crowd. Harlequins and Columbines. Spanish devils, Cinderellas, and Prince Charming, and less so, a sequined Elvis. 2 Red Deaths, and no less than 10 interpretations of Count Dracula, some better than others. Interesting. Dark Destiny 3, Children of Dracula, White Wolf Publishing, 1996, page 19. Nightmares are what this book is all about. You may be surprised at the extent to which Dracula and his children infect the history of humankind. His children contributed to the demise of the dirigible as a means of transportation, and they are teenagers in our suburbs today. Page 42, Melvin, you had such a hideous time when you were 4 years old that your mind fractured into a dozen personalities. Comment, some people have speculated that Harris was the victim of mind control. One method allegedly used to achieve this is subjecting a young child to severe abuse. And I guess that's in reference to Eric Harris's alleged abuse at a military base in New York State. Page 73, death was new way to say love. Page 74, man is a fallen creature, that our God is infinitely wrathful, destructive, and uncaring. The only light in the world's future came from a place of ultimate darkness. Page 231, centuries ago my companions and I were as you are now. Then we had the good fortune to attract the notice of a hidden elite who saw fit to initiate us into their company. Our benefactors are an exalted form of humanity blessed with eternal life and miraculous powers, a race that calls itself the Kindred. Comment, I would say Columbine's Trenchcoat Mafia was at some point noticed by a hidden elite who saw in them a way to further their own agenda. And again, this takes me back. If I had to make a top 10 list, and maybe I will do an episode on that, on the most anomalous issues, is of course Robin Anderson's heavily redacted documents in the interviews with her. But what was not redacted is that Chris Morris is traveling across the country to some kind of national trenchcoat mafia meeting. I just can't, I don't know what to do with that. And did they forget to redact that? Because that seems kind of damning, because in the documentation they redact, that's one of the most heavily, Robin Anderson's is some of the most heavily redacted documents in the Columbine case of what has been released. Obviously tens of thousands have not been released. But out of the ones that have been released, hers are some of the most heavily redacted. And what is not redacted is a reference to Chris Morris and some kind of a national meeting for the Trenchcoat Mafia. Page 583. Other credits from one of the authors of this trash include an essay on the rock horror connection in Splatterpunks 2. Well, that's curious. Comment, Splatterpunks, of course, is the name of 3 youths arrested at gunpoint outside the school on April 20th. So there's a specific reference to Columbines, which is a flower, so not that outside of the realm of a plausible coincidence. However, Splatterpunks, just adding them all up, 1 or 2 maybe, but how many are we going to accept here? Dark Destiny 1, White Wolf Publishing, 1995. Page 155, she was Shiloh Marie, the sweet little schoolmarm in the nearby town of Littleton. Okay, see, again, by itself, Littleton is not that crazy by itself. But now we have Littleton, Columbine, Splatterpunks, teenagers in the suburb. Wow, okay, we're about to get crazier. Now, page 444. Quote, the world I knew had been a dark gothic nightmare of neon sleaze. But now the public accepts things it never did before. Isolated critics aren't much of a problem, and the really bad ones can always be sacrificed. Fortunately, I have a lot of eager assistants in this work all over the world. It's a weird feeling giving approval for throwing maidens into a live volcano. It's not as hard as I thought it would be, and we have excellent television coverage. When we sacrificed some young males, the ratings weren't as high. The only time I've been really comfortable so far was the mass sacrifice of children under the full moon. Now, just real quick moon phases for Columbine. Apparently, the full moon was Friday, April 30th. The new moon was Friday, April 16th. In April of 99. Make of that what you will. Continuing on here, the ratings went through the roof. I know all the arguments. A few hundred slain before the eyes of the world means that thousands will not be raped, mutilated, and abused in secret by lone maniacs whose interest in the preservation of the social order is not very well established. Civilization must have its little sacrifices now and then, but I'm still uncomfortable when I raise doubts that the forces we serve or utilize ever wanted human sacrifices. The shadowy ones I obey remind me that our civilization has sunk too low to worry over details. We have to work our way back up to where we may be worthy of moral distinctions. Maybe so, maybe those children had to die. Some of them agreed to the sacrifice, but you can talk a child into nearly anything, unlike adults. From Dark Kingdoms by Richard Lee Byers, White Wolf Publishing, 98. Page 63. He wanted the company of one of the handful of trusted retainers he'd occasionally permitted to glimpse the human being hidden behind his godlike facade. Page 122. The creature received the CAR-15 and then opened the back door. Do you think we should begin with the church or the Sunday school, the spirit asked, examining the gun. I think the children. Page 133. When you look down on the underlings and thralls, you'll know that no matter how foul and worthless a creature you may actually be, at least you're better than they are. And whenever you destroy someone, you know you've cleansed creation of a bit of filth, and perhaps even justified your own existence in the process. That's weird. Okay, not a White Wolf publication, but it has some good quotes. Piercing the Darkness, Undercover with Vampires in America Today by Catherine Ramsland, HarperCollins Publishers, 98. Page 306, don't read into the incidents that shows like 60 Minutes and Jenny Jones like to exploit about LARPs and role-playing games. They present them as endangering the lives of players or their families and friends by compelling them to commit real crimes based on the subject matter their characters are dealing with. Page 492. I did hear about government investigations of vampires and government manipulations of brainwaves toward the end of creating antisocial psychosis among those who would become like vampires. Also, there were two products produced by White Wolf that might be relevant. They are called Denver by Night and Denver by Gaslight. They are not books, but rather game scenarios. I am unable to get copies of these products, unfortunately. Do they contain any hint of something similar to what happened in Columbine High School? I am reminded of what the webmaster of a Denver area vampire LARP group wrote on her site soon after 420. Columbine, yes, it happened in-game. The other thing, Denver, not exactly the most unknown city in the U.S. If they have these scenarios for all cities, then it's not suspicious. But if they only have Denver, or if Denver's only one of a few, then that might be a little bit suspicious. So in the book Extreme Evil, Kids Killing Kids, written by Bob Larson, 1999... references Columbine students telling reporters that the trenchcoat guys claimed to be vampires and that they were telling other kids they were vampires while at school. Now, supposedly, it's not specifically referencing Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, but other Trenchcoat Mafia members. And these statements supposedly made just days after the shooting, which is weird. Is that just something else that's been memory hold? Okay, so I found another one of Star Viego's posts, which has some info we have not gone over before. That is, now that there's been so many mind shocks in the series, how many more mind shocks can there be? Apparently a lot. Now, are there Virginia Tech connections here? So from documents 13,664 and 13,688, there are AOL online profiles mentioning Azrael Abyss, aka the Rage Z, who is allegedly a Columbine student and is in the Trenchcoat Mafia, compared to Herr Azrael, aka Weston, Virginia, high school whack killer Michael Kennedy, regarding to the ring around V-Tech. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. Document 13,698. I don't know if we went over this. There's a reference to a student at Hinckley High School, Aurora, Colorado, who is suspended on April 21st, 99, for wearing a black trench coat and white t-shirt referencing killing people. So not all the schools were closed in the area. Most of them supposedly were. All right, here we're going to get crazy. So, document 13,824 has a reference to darkminds.com, a goth vampire site. Wayback Machine has the first entry of this website on May 8th, 99. Tipster Nancy Daves says that Harrison Klebold were posting on this site before April 20th. Thus, the site was cleansed of their material. He says that Dylan was posting under Rocknoyrol, Rocnoyrrol. Rocknoyrol. Harrison Klebold allegedly also posted on whitesonly.com, now defunct. So, let's put out the call to all the MINDSHOCK listeners. Who knows about this site, and who knows what was on it before May 8th, 99, because that's the first snapshot from Wayback Machine, and what it says is, as of May 7th, 99, the website is closed until future notice. So literally the day after they closed the website, that's the first capture. Anybody find that kind of suspicious? Just a little bit? So were Harris and Klebold really posting on a goth vampire site, and what did they post? What information would that contain? I actually think a great way to solve this definitively is to just have 100% access to everything that was online from Harris and Klebold. Everything they ever posted on any website. I think that could reveal all the information necessary to make any kind of determination on what was going on with the Trenchcoat Mafia and their potential involvement, as well as countless other issues. So, document 13,825, there's a reference to Julie Main from Littleton, a.k.a. Miss Lordless, that both young men referred to as well. So, I couldn't find any more information on this Julie Main from Littleton that both men referred to as Miss Lordless. Document 13,837, interview with Brandon Martine, 17, of North Glen High School in Westminster, Colorado, April 23rd, 99. He met Harris 2 to 4 times to play video games, the last time at Red Rocks Community College in 98 or 97. How does he not remember the year? Because this interview was conducted April 23rd, 99. Document 13,847, reference to Eric playing his clan against other teams. Document 13,859, his screen name was Jester, the same one Harris acknowledged on his website, along with Imaginos and Excalibur. I'm hearing rumors all over the net saying it's the Trenchcoat Mafia nationwide and stuff, which is scaring me. So, wow. He gave this Brandon Martine a shout-out, along with the main people in the Trenchcoat Mafia, or was that, did he do that, did Eric Harris do that on purpose to throw everything off? But, so is this definitive evidence that he's playing, like, what other game would have clans? Because is this specific evidence that Eric Harris is playing Vampire the Masquerade? Document 13,876, an email with a Reb 1712 refers to more than 2 shooters in school walking out in plain clothes just like everybody else. Document 13,886, email to Jeff Boaz of Ohio by unknown cafeteria witness mentioning seeing at least 5 other students near one or more shooters. And that's when the police arrived. These students removed their shirts and hurriedly vacated the cafeteria along with other students. Boaz backs away from his statement on document 13,899. So that's curious because of all the witness intimidation and rewriting of the narratives. Because I've gone over this so many times, the typed up reports do not reflect the handwritten reports of student witnesses. And of course, the coincidence theorists, they just don't want to touch that. So there's also document 14,000 references members.xoom.com/private.dir/tcm.htm. This page makes the Trenchcoat Mafia seem like a national organization. The Wayback Machine does not have this on file. I mean, it would be curious to know because obviously the Wayback Machine, they don't have 100% of all websites on file, but 1999 was not that far. I mean, obviously there's tons of websites from the early to mid-90s that have not been archived. It would seem like they really should have had that. So was this some kind of government op with the pull to remove archived pages? Because what was on that website? Document 14,013, MSNBC TV witness. This young lady was interviewed and she told how it was the beginning of her lunch hour that she needed to go out to her car to get her makeup. She asked another female student to walk with her. As they were walking, she indicated seeing a heavyset student with dark hair or a mustache who was up on the roof of the school wearing a trench coat, and with him was another student wearing a t-shirt. Comment by Star Viego, 2 shooters on the roof, ? That's a new one. Document 14,032, TV witness. While watching the news of Tuesday's shootings, we observed one of the hostage students high-fiving another male student on the bus. Since the other students seemed stunned, why were these students high-fiving each other in joy as though they had just pulled something off? Could these 2 students have been conspirators with the other 2? Document 14,874, Cassie Bernal's mother explained that they had moved to their current location over a year ago primarily to get Cassie away from her friends who they felt were a bad influence. And there are a couple of these accounts from a few different students, both in the Trenchcoat Mafia and otherwise, of just these circles of bad influence friends all over the general area. Document 15,080, I don't know if we went over this one. A redacted female said that she had 2 weeks of foreknowledge. Redacted also said she knew there were 3 gunmen and gave me the idea that there were actually 5 gunmen, signed by Alicia Hewitt. Document 15,222, I'm actually not sure if we went over this. We went over so many. Benjamin Robert Stevens, 19, was arrested on May 7th, 99 on an outstanding warrant. A high-point rifle was seized. It was purchased on May... I don't know if this is a typo. He was arrested on May 7th, 99. It says purchased on May 19th, 99. Was that April 19th? He had gone to the Rampart area to fire the rifle. There was some camouflage clothing in the car as well as several black garments. He moved back to Littleton a couple of weeks before April 20th. Stevens said he knew Dylan Klebold from attending Columbine High. Stevens said that he knew Mark Maines also from his association with Klebold. He did not have any direct involvement with the incident. The rumors being discussed are strongly suggesting that other people were definitely involved in the incident. Stevens expressed a strong interest in providing any further info to investigators in the future regarding comments made by the associates about other individuals being involved. Comment by Star Viego, tellingly, there is no further evidence of questioning of Stevens regarding what he knew of the Trenchcoat Mafia. There's also document 15,627 regarding the suicide of Bobby Patterson, age 19, on April 29th, 99. Okay, so let's take a look at this suicide. This is yet another strange death connected to Columbine, which I don't actually know if we went over this one. So this is document 21,470. Event narrative here. Female caller said that her employees in Clovis, Texas, had a nephew in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, commit suicide on April 29th, 99. According to employees, the nephew knew the suspect of Columbine High School and was also friends of the black boy killed at Columbine High School. Caller said the nephew lives at this particular address in Wheat Ridge. PD confirms the suicide. April 29th, 99, at that address. So this is pretty insane here. So knew the suspect, so does that mean either Harris or Klebold or one of the other Trenchcoat Mafia members? Keep in mind, this is the early days before the narrative changed. So there's also here, wow, interesting. There's a lead control number here, DN3061. Interview this individual's mother pre-bomb information. What does that mean? Pre-bomb? He has some kind of bomb information? And then there's another note here. Date May 7th, 99. Disposition May 17th, 99. Interviewed the mother. Said that her son only knew Isaiah Scholes from Crichton Middle School. She thought her son committed suicide because he did not want to go to jail again. So, is this in reference to a completely different crime? Or is it in reference to Columbine? So, he knew one of the suspects, allegedly, supposedly, commits suicide because he doesn't want to go to jail again? I mean, and Wheat Ridge, this isn't the first time Wheat Ridge has popped up. We've been going over Wheat Ridge High School in the area. What does this all mean? Was he involved in the plot? Did he supply bombs? I mean, what is going on here? A few other incidents we actually did not go over regarding trenchcoat mafia type attacks. Here's a curious one. December 15, 2005, LA County. 2 teens, 15 and 17, arrested for planning an attack on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 06. A date picked because of a song by shock rocker Marilyn Manson at Quartz Hill High School in Lancaster, LA County. An investigation began on Wednesday, December 14th, when a student contacted the vice principal and said 2 former classmates were planning a Columbine-type assault on the campus. The boys, dressed in the goth style, characterized by black clothing, black makeup, and nail polish and piercings. One was enrolled at Little Rock High School and was taken into custody. The boy, who had a gothic-type symbol carved into his arm, submitted to an interview with his probation officer nearby. The boys had been in probation in connection with a 2003 assault in which a 14-year-old boy was sodomized with a metal rod. At first, he denied the plot and then admitted that he and the other boy indeed were planning such an attack. He later boasted that they planned on using an improvised explosive device. A search of his home turned up live ammo, a knife, gothic crossword puzzles, murder-suicide puzzles, and anarchy gothic-type writings. He was booked on suspicion of making terrorist threats. The other boy was located at his home, where he and his father agreed to a search where produced a gas mask, CO2 canisters, satanic drawings, pictures of domestic terrorists, including the 2 Columbine killers, both Oklahoma City bombers, Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald, and others. Deputies also retrieved printed instructions downloaded from the internet on how to make improvised bombs, detonators, fuses, a computer, a black trench coat with boots, knives, and hate and anti-government literature. The plan was to kill all the students who had made fun of him at school and then commit suicide. The boys had been experimenting with and had exploded improvised exploded devices, several CO2 canister bombs, Molotov cocktails, and light bulb bombs. The pair had not obtained any guns yet, but planned to do so from an unnamed friend at a pawn shop. We believe this was a legitimate threat, that it was going to happen if everything came together for them, Lancaster Sheriff's Captain Carl Dealey said. Interestingly, the area was especially hard hit by post-Columbine hysteria. Some more articles here. In the aftermath of the Columbine shootings, threats of violence erupted on Valley campuses. Those threats and rumors prompted 6 arrests and 20 suspensions. 2 freshmen at Quartz Hill High School were arrested April 30th, 1999, for investigation of making terrorist threats, and a 3rd was cited and released for having a practice grenade, LA County Sheriff's investigator said. Yeah, I don't even know if I went over these in the previous episode, which actually went over all of these other attacks that were supposedly going to happen simultaneously. So here's a case predating Columbine. This is May 26, 1994. Clay Shrout, 17, murdered his parents and 2 sisters, kidnapped his prom date from her home, then drove to the school and held his first period math class hostage at Ryle High School in Union, Kentucky. The vice principal traded himself for the hostages and convinced him to give up the gun. Jeff Martin, the detective who led the investigation, says that in the weeks before the incident, Shrout talked over his plan with a group of friends. He even told them that he planned to kill his English teacher. By the time Clay became a freshman at Ryle High School, his search for a self-image had taken on a darker, morbid turn. He changed his appearance, wearing black, all black, every day. In a school where preppy is fashion, does that sound familiar? Clay's combat boots, trench coat, and silver chains were a standout. He began talking about bomb making, smoking marijuana, popping speed and dropping acid and stealing for the fun of it. Left increasingly to himself, Clay spent more and more time in his darkened bedroom with his computer and violent music. He began downloading info about bomb building, bought the anarchist cookbook, and bragged to classmates that he could build a pipe bomb that would blow up the whole neighborhood. His class papers and English poems took on an increasingly morbid overtone. He covered nearly every inch of his bedroom and walls in posters of heavy metal bands and groups depicting satanic messages or calls for death. He began dabbling in the occult. One friend dismissed Clay's growing fascination with witchcraft, vampires, and sacrifice as merely the pursuit of knowledge. But Suarez said Clay once showed him a series of about 10 horizontal cuts down his forearm that Clay attributed to a vampire ritual. Note from Starviego here, he probably would have done this with others, implying a social network at odds with the loner angle they're always pushing. From Shrout's room, they collected a book, The Complete Book of Spells, Ceremonies, and Magic. Another note from Starviego, the occult angle, often present but never investigated. Clay had collected an arsenal of some 30 knives, Death Stars, and brass knuckles. They also found nunchucks, a sword, and a BB gun. Shrout told police he had the weapons for protection, even though he said no one really bothered him. Throughout the statement 2 hours after the arrest, Shrout never seemed to grasp the magnitude of his actions. He seemed alternatively confused, resigned, and defiant. Despite being unable to explain his actions, he vividly remembered specific details. Wow, that almost sounds like somebody that was in some kind of trance or mind-controlled. Because they're going to be confused, resigned, and then they're going to be defiant because if they truly believe they didn't do it, but then they have memories in their head at odds with that. Okay, so Shrout was diagnosed with severe, still undisclosed mental illnesses. At one point, while he was being held in the Kenton County Jail awaiting charges, in Boone County, deputies got wind of a possible escape plot. To foil it, they took a different route to the courthouse and picked up Shrout from jail at 3 a.m. Note from Starviego here. Interestingly, it sounds like he may have had Confederates on the outside, someone the cops took seriously. That is kind of curious, though. The cops took it that seriously? That there was some kind of possible escape plot for this random kid? I didn't want to be stopped from disappearing, so I decided I had to kill them. I mean, I didn't really want to, but there wasn't really any way around it. This reminds me of Kip Kinkle's statement, I had to do it, I had no other choice when being questioned by police. After the alarm went off that May morning, he went outside to his father's Jeep to get a Colt 380 semi-automatic handgun hidden in the glove box. He calmly described walking through the house, methodically killing his family. Starviego's note here, was the alarm a trigger? That was bizarre. Alright, here's another mind shock. Who knew that the Columbine case would intersect none other but Buffy the Vampire Slayer? So this was a post from a Buffy fan. I was watching season 6 DVD special features. It had something about the most popular episodes. It had something about the episode that didn't air because of Columbine. Before they said something about the episode, the narrator said, but on April 20th, 1999, a tragedy broke out that would change America forever. In Littleton, Colorado's Columbine High School, 2 disturbed youths used an arsenal of weapons to murder 12 classmates and a teacher. And then he went on about talking about Buffy. But the coincidence is that episode had to do with the whole student body being murdered. I'll write a short summary on the episode. Buffy is out patrolling one night. She gets attacked by this demon that gives you an aspect of the demon. The aspect that Buffy got was being able to read people's minds. It was all fun for a while until it was lunchtime. Reading thoughts started getting out of hand and the thoughts started overlapping. But when Buffy was about to sit down to eat in the school cafeteria, all the thoughts drowned out except for one. The thought was, this time tomorrow I'll kill you all. In the cafeteria? That's weird. So as Buffy and her friends are trying to figure out who it is that wants to kill everyone in the school, Buffy is in the school courtyard and looks up at the clock tower and sees the shadow of a shotgun. She climbs up there and it's one of the guys that says he's being ignored and bullied by everyone. Buffy tells him his whole speech on why he shouldn't do it, and he was actually up there trying to kill himself. After that scene, Buffy's best friend Xander's in the school kitchen trying to get a free snack when he notices the lunch lady putting rat poison in the school food. So she tries to kill him but doesn't. Wait a second. It's called Earshot Season 4, Episode 19. 419. It was written and shot 3 weeks before. They aired it September 99. So they aired it that same year. Wait, so that was set to be aired... Wait, when was it set to be aired? That week? What day? That's kind of weird, though. Some dialogue here. Xander stated, I'm still having problems with the fact that one of us is just going to gun everyone down for no reason. Cordelia responds, yeah, because that never happens in American high schools. Oz states, it's bordering on trendy. And then Xander states, who hasn't just idly thought about taking out the whole place with a semi-automatic? You know, that's kind of weird because this is pre-Columbine. See, post-Columbine, you could see why the dialogue could be that way. It's bordering on trendy. It's not like there were that many incidents. Huh. That is all very, very weird, is it not? Here's another strange link posted by July 22nd, 2003. On Tapatalk, possibly earlier, but this is in reference to the murder of Robert Schwartz. December 8th, 2001, Leesburg, Virginia. And this is a crazy case. Wow. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Supposedly, there was a role-playing game, Underworld, which was used to convince these people to kill this guy, who is a nationally renowned scientist in the field of biometrics and DNA research. I mean, this is insane. This is crazy. 4 young people, Kyle Hulbert, 18, Michael Fall, 21, Katie Inglis, 19, and Clara Schwartz, 19, are arrested in Loudoun County, Virginia for the stabbing, slashing death of biophysicist Robert M. Schwartz, 57. On December 8, 2001, at his secluded farmhouse, daughter Clara convinced Hulbert to kill her father, who she claimed was trying to poison her. Schwartz's death is related to a string of recent deaths of biowar scientists, claim some conspiracy types. Anyway, the case has some interesting parallels to Columbine. Here are some relevant quotes and comments. The suspect favored all black outfits, long black trench coats. The killings had cult overtones. The suspects are said to have a fascination with both swords and Satanism. Authorities are also studying a book known as the Vampire's Bible and researching an internet role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade. Kyle Hubert, who killed his victim with a 27-inch sword, was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He was taking at least 3 medication, which would have included Ritalin for his ADHD. The use of Ritalin and SSRIs has been associated with a very large percentage of school shooters of the type we are studying here. And of course, the coincidence theorists maintain there's no link at all with medication. He has spent time at psychiatric facilities over the last decade. He was obsessed with the occult and obsessed with internet role-playing games and vampire lore. Kyle thinks this is all a game. He belonged to a coven, a group of young men and women who read books on witchcraft. Imaginary vampires named Ordog, Saba, and Nicodemus gave him permission to kill. And are they really imaginary, or are they other individuals here? Michael Fall asked for lessons at a shooting range and spoke of joining the military. Fall painted his nails dark color and often spoke of violence. Scores of knives and an altar were found during a search of his residence. Huh. That's weird. That's really weird. And especially given the scientist's standing in the scientific community. That's really weird. I mean, I don't know what to make of this one. Prosecutors portrayed Clara as a manipulative young woman who used her role-playing game Underworld to convince her friends to kill her father. See, the thing is, like, who else was involved in this? Are there MKUltra or government links? Because if there's a reason to take this guy out by somebody, I mean, is this the way they would do it so they don't have to get their hands dirty? A post by Apologies for Existence here. The Trenchcoat Mafia guys all had individual, distinct distinctive ways of dressing that can be easily identifiable even when the names are redacted in the documents. The part about the collar being raised up in the back gives off vampire-like vibes to me. You really have to wonder what these guys were into just by the clothing they were wearing and how they were dressing. I often wonder if some of these trenchcoat mafia guys were secretly into vampirism, but it never came out publicly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so much here that has not been investigated properly, and just connections to a lot of these other cases are pretty crazy. So let's close this episode out with another look at White Wolf. So this post by Star Viego, archived February 20th, 2004, beginning April 17th, 1999, and continuing for 2 weekends thereafter, London, England was racked by the explosion of nail bomb attacks in 2 minority neighborhoods and in a gay bar. 3 dead, many injured. Police initially said a group known as the White Wolves were responsible based on numerous letters that were sent to prospective targets around the same time and claims for responsibility by that and 3 other groups. Wow, this is weird. So this... Whoa, okay. London, England, nail bomb attacks within days of Columbine? So 3 successive weekends between the 17th and 30th of April 99 by a group, the White Wolves, possibly connections to this vampire masquerade game and Columbine? The note read in part, quote, "When the clock strike midnight on December 31st, 99, the White Wolves will begin to howl. And when the wolves begin to howl, the wolves begin to hunt. You have been warned. Hail Britannia." Police announced they were looking for one Del O'Connor, 39, alleged neo-Nazi leader of the White Wolves, which has itself an offshoot of a group called Combat 18. 1 and 8 being a numerical equivalent of A and H, meeting Adolf Hitler. Later, police would say he was in the U.S. at the time, and it was known that he spent 2 weeks with a group known as the Hammerskins in Dallas in November 98, or he was there for a year. He was arrested when he returned in England in June. Sources at the time hinted at a U.S. connection. Whoever is responsible appears to have been strongly influenced by pre-millennial philosophies and tactics emanating from extremist groups in the U.S. Detectives told the media that they suspected the group or individual behind the London bombs had received help from an international source. So who are these Hammerskins? The Hammerskins first appeared in the late 80s as the Dallas-based Confederate Hammerskins and quickly spread across the country. Soon, other groups began adopting the Hammerskin philosophy. The Northern Hammerskins in the Great Lakes region, the Eastern Hammerskins in the Pennsylvania and New Jersey area, and the Western Hammerskins in Arizona and California. By 89, the Hammerskin Nation, the HN, emerged as the unifying federation for these different groups. By the mid-90s, the Hammerskin Nation went global with chapters in Australia, Canada, and the Czech Republic, France, Germany, Great Britain, and the Netherlands, New Zealand, Poland, Serbia, Slovenia, and Russia. Where were the Hammerskins in the Denver area? Yes, according to one independent reporter who tied them to the Trenchcoat Mafia. Wow, this is pretty crazy. What is going on here? So, this was posted on etext.org, or at least there's an archive of Zines here, no longer up. And now an update from Wednesday, Colorado, the following. I might have just confirmed that some of the Trenchcoat Mafia are also Western Hammerskins. Plus, guess what? When police finally did roll in, there were in fact 4 trenchcoats lying on the floor. I spoke with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia in more than a dozen towns in this country, and also Western skins in a few. The Western branch of the Hammerskins are definitely in Denver heavy, and they're headquartered. However, I was wrong, thank God. They had nothing to do with the killings this past week in a public school in Columbine, Colorado, although 3 of the 9 who planned Tuesday's placing of pipe bombs and murderous gunfire were in fact members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. Wait, 3 of the 9 people who... Trenchcoat Mafia organization itself has little or nothing to do with conspiracy to commit chaos. The 4 empty trenchcoats remain a partially unconfirmed story. I have confirmed 2 missing suspects with a handful of credible sources. But I was a little carried away when one white Pride member I interviewed told me it was not 2 but 4 empty trenchcoats on the floor. He seemed credible. He remains my only source on that. Although this source says neither of the two groups as organizations were involved, he does seem to imply a connection. One is reminded of Chris Morris's boast that the Trenchcoat Mafia was a national organization and he had attended a national meeting of the group. Plus, what about the claim that plans for attacking the school were delayed for one day to have it coincide with Hitler's birthday? According to the FBI report, page 83, the weapons came from a local militia in the area. The reason it happened on 4/20 is because they got all the guns and ammos and explosive compounds for free to do it on that date. Huh. And it's possible they may have been communicating via internet, just as the Trenchcoat Mafia may have communication with other trenchcoat groups around the country. Terrorism expert David Kapitanchik of Aberdeen University said the use of coded messages on the internet by right-wing groups and individuals added to the problem facing police. What is a puzzle to me is the timing. I'm not sure why it's happening now. I think there's a sort of link with the shootings in Denver in that individuals and small groups of people with the same sort of ideas, probably across the world, get on internet sites and access the same material and encourage each other. Admittedly, this is a pretty thin thread upon which to base a connection, but there are other hints. The White Wolves claimed credit for the London bombs. White Wolf Inc. of Augusta, Georgia are producers of the LARP game Vampire the Masquerade, which I strongly suspect some of the Trenchcoat Mafia were playing, including Harrison Klebold. As one author said, by chance does the name of the company which supplies all the information one might want on how to kill and assassinate and suggestions on scenarios for acts of terrors for role players and LARPers coincide with the Nazi splinter group White Wolves. By chance, role players have for a long time carefully studied the theory on how to execute or injure people, with examples the type of bombs used in London. It's desirable to create shrapnel if one is aiming for injuring people. Shrapnel is very easy to create, but there's relatively few terrorist bombs that has that function. The easiest way to do this is to place small pieces of metal, nails, pellets, or such like on the surface of the bomb. The gaming magazine Grinding, February 93, excerpt from the book De Vergivnas Arm. By chance, role players, LARPers, and terrorists live in the same context with combat terror and White Wolves. Where do they get everything from? Just like the Columbine surveillance tapes had to be sent to Washington for, quote-unquote, enhancement, a videotape used to catch the London bomber was sent to the U.S. for enhancement, though it was NASA, not the FBI. Also, Prime Minister Tony Blair was in Washington at the time for the anniversary summit meeting of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. And of course, some believe NATO was actually on the ground at Columbine. Though British police initially said it was a conspiracy, they later blamed a lone nut with no clear motive. Police charged engineer David Copeland, 22, with murder and 3 counts of causing an explosion. Just hours after Copeland's arrest, the police were confidently asserting that Copeland was acting alone and had no connections with any Nazi organizations. Here's the thing about all these lone wolf theories. Wolf, again, that word. They put all this out definitively before thorough investigation. See, if it was after months and months of thorough investigation, why would they say he acted alone immediately? They could say, we're still investigating. Like, that's one of the weird things. It's kind of like a tip-off that there's something weird going on. It is understood he was acting alone for his own motives, David Vaness, Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, told journalists. Copeland's lawyers argued that he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia that compelled him to carry out the bombings. A succession of eminent doctors told the court how Copeland was suffering from grandiose religious delusions that made him believe he was acting on God's orders, and that he would be rewarded for his work by being lifted up into rapture at the time of Armageddon. Just like Columbine, there was a political impetus as a result of the crime. But though new laws are to be introduced later this year, what a coincidence, to target violent right-wing organizations, the governments will stop short of outlawing them, fearing that such an action would serve only to drive them further underground. Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, will replace the current Prevention of Terrorism Act with much broader proposals which, it hoped, would dismantle their organizational and fundraising abilities. The new Prevention of Terrorism bill will, for the first time, include religious and ideological as well as political motives. Right-wing extremist animal rights groups and religious cults that use violence to pursue their goals are also being targeted. Okay, continuing on here. Also, we don't know the identity of the white t-shirt bomber. He didn't sound like a trenchcoat mafia. Could he have been an intelligence operative planted in the ranks of the Hammerskins? That is the question. And of course, as I went over in previous documentation, there were suspicions that there was some kind of, even early reports that there was another Columbine going on in Atlanta, Georgia, or somewhere in Georgia, where supposedly there is a White Wolf headquarters. Mama Fourpaws, which has a lot of great posts on these forums, has a mind shock here that I've never seen before. Kind of reminds me of the other Vodak. Not vodka, Vodak. Whose names kept, unless she misspelled that, whose name kept popping up in the early stages of Columbine. He was older. He was an older guy kids kept seeing, neo-Nazi connection. Really strange how these things meld together, my 2 cents. Does anybody know anything about the other Vodak or other vodka? Star Viego, as usual, with his research on point. Other suspects were arrested in these bombings. There was a 4th man arrested in 3 days. This was on The Guardian. Guardian.co.uk, May 2nd, 99. Bomb factory man seized as death toll rises. So, wow, yeah, a lot of arrests here. Another article from the Guardian.co.uk. Jamie Stickley, 17, a neighbor, said he had occasionally seen 2 men at the address. They would wear black baggy clothes and t-shirts with Iron Maiden written on them. Their friends used to come around and they all wore the same. They all seemed to be in gothic clothes and they looked like they were in a band. So yeah, I mean, clearly this guy's not a loner. So yeah, a lot of questions here and a lot of questions about a potential vampire connection. Vampire the Masquerade role-playing, is it simply one component, and are some video game or role-playing companies actually complicit with plants in adding some kind of subliminal programming to the game in some kind of a strange Manchurian candidate type conspiracy to trigger pre-selected subjects to execute these plots? And of course these triggers wouldn't work on other individuals that weren't using these medications or pre-selected in contact with other older individuals, agents, handlers, whatever you want to call them. That is what we are going to round out this episode with. Hope everybody found another edition of the MINDSHOCK podcast interesting and informative. Plenty more to come. You want to help support the podcast? If you don't into our PayPal, just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.